What's up, guys? Welcome back to Sims Tech, and today we're going to be doing... Start over on that one. What's up, guys? Welcome back to Sims Tech, and today I'm going to be showing you 5 ways to make your drone footage look more professional. Let's jump into it. Alright, so the first one we're going to be talking about is ISO and shutter speed. So on pretty much all of DJI's products, the way you control the brightness of the shot is with ISO and shutter speed, and basically they both control how much light is coming into the camera. So that's what ISO does, is limits how much light is coming in, and then shutter speed's pretty self-explanatory. So ISO, you want to be as low as possible. You want it, so on all the DJI stuff, you want it to be at 100. I believe that's the lowest level on all of them. Shutter speed, you want to be 2 times the frame rate. So if you're shooting at 30 frames per second, you want to shoot with shutter speed at 60. If you're shooting at 60 frames per second, you want your shutter speed to be at 120, etc., etc. So you want these 2 settings to be as close to those 2 ideal points as possible. If you get those 2 settings to those points, close to those ideal points, and your shot doesn't look good, if it's too blown out, too bright, then you can adjust a little bit. But the problem is, if you crank your ISO up way too high to adjust for a dark shot, then your shot's going to get really grainy. If your shot is too bright and you try to move the shutter speed up to get a darker image, and it's not going to look very good. So you want those 2 settings as close to those ideal points as possible, and that'll give you the crispest shot you can have. But if you have the settings close to your ideal point, so if you have ISO at 100 or close to 100 and then shutter speed close to twice your frame rate, and your shot is way too bright, what you're going to want to do is get ND filters. ND stands for neutral density, and basically they're these lenses that you can put on your drone and they darken the image. Basically they're just sunglasses for your drone, and that'll allow you to darken the image without having to move the shutter speed up, which would make your image look bad. So the ND filters darken your image and allow you to stay close to those ideal settings on the drone, and again give you the clearest image possible. So ISO as low as possible, shutter speed twice your frame rate, and use ND filters. You definitely want to buy some ND filters. I'll leave a link in the description. There are different intensities of ND filters, like ND4, ND8, etc. Number 2, fly smoothly. I've been doing aerial videography for real estate and stuff for a couple years, so I have a little bit of experience, but also I've seen a lot of, I guess, who you could call my competitors, and a lot of times they will be flying and it'll be a nice smooth shot, and then all of a sudden they'll turn their drone and it'll jump and it looks terrible. And people fly very jerky and don't think that the viewers care. So if they're flying not very smooth, they're like, oh, the viewers won't really notice it. Well, I can tell you that they'll notice it even subconsciously. So when you're filming, you want to keep the shot as smooth as possible, because if you jerk the camera, it's going to pull the viewer out of the video and make them think about how you're flying a drone, and that's not what you want them to do. You want to pull them into your story and what you're trying to tell and the subject of your video. You don't want them to think about how, oh, he's flying a drone. So you want to keep it as smooth as possible, fly as smoothly as possible without jerking, and keep it fluid is a good word for it. Keep the motion with the camera fluid. Third thing, get the props out of the frame. This is another thing I've seen a lot from professional videographers with drones, and they're flying around showing a house or whatever, and then their prop dips into the image. That does the same thing that we're talking about with number 2. It pulls the viewer out of the shot. It makes them think about not whatever you're trying to tell, the story you're trying to tell, the subject you're trying to focus on, but it makes them think about how you're flying a drone. And that's not good. That's not what you want to do. It makes the video look unprofessional, and it just distracts. So as best you can do, fly without getting the prop in the image, or just crop it down later in post. So that's a benefit of shooting in 4K, so you can crop out props. Fourth thing, this is kind of just a quick tip that I've learned a while ago and I've used it a lot, and it's very helpful. You can fly in reverse and then reverse the video in post. So if you want to start in a very broad area like the sky and then fly right in on a very precise subject, perhaps up to a window or something, then you don't have to do that whole shot while starting in the sky and then flying right up to a window, because you might smack into the window and break your drone, and it's very hard to keep that whole shot smooth. So you can start at the window, per se, and then fly backwards, and then reverse that shot in post. So like here in this footage I took, you can see I start right next to me and then fly backwards for the whole shot. So I'm just pulling away from me, and I'm making sure not to move, so when I reverse it, it's not obvious that I'm reversing the shot. And then after I reverse the shot in post, it looks like I'm flying right in to in front of me, but there's no danger of me smacking myself in the face with a 30-mile-an-hour drone, because that would not be good. Something to keep in mind when doing this, however, make sure there's no roads around or people walking around, because then when you reverse the shot, you don't want to have a highway full of cars driving backwards. Last one. Number 5, frame rate. Most people think it's always best to shoot in the highest frame rate possible, or really 60 frames per second. They think that more frames means more data and more info, and it just looks smoother and looks better. While that sometimes is the case, if you're trying to give your footage a cinematic look, if you're trying to make a short film or try to make a cinematic looking video, you actually don't always want to shoot in 60 frames per second. You actually might want to shoot in 30 frames per second or even 24. So 30 frames per second is obviously capturing less frames. And so if there's a frame here and a frame here, to bridge the gap between these two frames, your eye interprets it as motion, as something moving, and it's much more cinematic. Rather, as in 60 frames per second, there'd be a frame here, a frame here, a frame here, and a frame here. There'd be more data, and so it sees each frame, and so it's very clear and more crisp and more sharp, but that's not necessarily what you want for a cinematic look. You can look in this shot that I took. I'm panning from left to right on myself, and you can see that in the 60 frame version on the right, you can see that it's much clearer, much crisper, but the one on the left, you can see it looks more like motion, it looks more cinematic, and that it looks much smoother, as opposed to the one on the right might look a little choppy because it's so precise. So that's it for this video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know in the comments below what you liked, what you didn't like, what you learned, what you thought was useless, and what you thought maybe was helpful. And if you like this video, leave a comment down below if you want me to make more tip videos like this one. I have some more ideas for what I could do. Also, if you like this kind of content, I got more videos coming up, so please hit subscribe if you think I've earned it, and hit the like button if you did like this video. It really helps me out. But that's it for now, guys. Thank you so much for watching. See you in the next one.